Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I was born in the UK, but my family moved to the French-speaking part of Switzerland for my dad's job. Since I was 4, I've been in local schools. I picked up French just by being around people speaking it. At the time of this story, I was around 14 and I speak French as fluently as a local. It surprises people when I switch between fluent English and French so easily. I was the only person in my school aside from the English teacher who spoke fluent English. So more often than not, I was paired with kids that joined the school and their native language was English to help them get along and understand stuff. Although this was my first experience being paired up with someone. The current story. So one morning when I got to school, a few minutes into the first period, the dean called me into her office through the intercom. My first reaction was, oh heck, what have I done? Since whoever got called to her office was pretty much always in deep trouble. I get up and leave the class with everyone staring at me, clearly wondering what had happened because I was never in trouble. I head down to her office, knock on the door, and hesitantly enter because my anxiety was making me think that I've screwed up real bad even if I wasn't aware of having done anything. The dean was sitting at her desk, while the entitled son and his entitled mom, who looked like they were from the Middle East, were sitting on the other side of the desk. The language teacher was sitting next to the dean as well. Let me just clear this up first. The entitled student wasn't an entitled jerk at the start. He was actually quite friendly. So I'll speed through the first part when he's bearable. The dean introduced me to him, explaining he'd just arrived at the school and only spoke English. The language teacher left once introductions were done since I could handle it from there. I was paired up with him to help him around the school and with communication. He shared all of my classes, so he stayed with me. Once the entitled mother was assured that I was decent enough for her son, she let us go and she left. The first few weeks went perfectly fine. He didn't need to do the tests I was doing because he knew too little. I was teaching him French as he needed it, and he pretty much knew enough basics to get along in basic communication. Then nonsense started to happen when I was starting to show up late to school. Another side note, I've been bullied the last school year and it was around the beginning of May that my attendance was getting a bit shoddy. This was mainly because my mental health was getting worse and I was so suicidal that I didn't want to leave the house in fear of me doing something stupid. I've been off for 3 days because I spent 2 nights in the mental health unit at the hospital. I come back and the entitled student comes and finds me. At that point in time, I was very tired, depressed, and anxious. He comes to me and says, "Hey, where were you the last 3 days? I barely understood anything. And I got detention for not doing homework I couldn't understand. Did you even try attempting it?" "No, I just didn't understand anything." I just sighed knowing he was lying because he knew enough to try and attempt his homework. He showed me the sheet, and that confirmed what I thought. He could have tried. I apologized and just got on with my day catching up with my work and helping him. I didn't want to explain what I was going through. On top of my mental health issues that were developing, I was in a very toxic relationship which did not help. A few days later I was off again, but only for 1 day. And I was leaving school a lot because I had almost daily appointments at the unit. And obviously the entitled student wasn't too pleased about this, and he brought in his mom. The entitled mother was waiting for me when I got back. The kid came up to me when I was back. From the first time I was off, I instantly regretted having accepted to be paired with him. She didn't come near me, but she was giving me death glares as I spoke to her kid. He tells me, "I have a test in a few days and I don't understand the revision stuff at all. I need you to teach me to speak French." "I've been teaching you what you need. You should be fine." "I don't think you heard me. I want you to teach me French so I can be as fluent as you." "Look man, There is no way I can teach you to be as fluent as I am in a space of a few days. That's just impossible.
You will teach me French or my mother will get you removed from school.
I was about to walk away until his mom grabbed me by the arm and turned me around to face her. Ma'am, please don't touch me. I barely know you.
You will teach my son French, or I will take matters to the headmaster.
She spoke somewhat quietly to me as not to get much attention. Again, I don't mean to be disrespectful in any way, but there is no way I can do that. I'm helping him as much as I can when I'm at school. I can't do more. I'm busy outside of school.
My baby keeps telling me you're leaving school early. Why?
That's none of your business. Then she raised her voice.
It is my business because you aren't helping my beautiful boy.
I yanked my arm free and walked into the building because she had no right to be in school. Fast forward to the middle of May. I was signed off school for the rest of the year by the unit because I couldn't leave the house. It was around that time that I was spending most of my time at the unit. And when I spent a week as a temporary inpatient, how it worked was you had those who were hospitalized and there were 2 extra rooms for those who needed a night there, but weren't hospitalized. So I was coming back each evening, and I wasn't even bothering packing up my stuff with me. I just left them there because I kept coming back. The entitled son only had my Instagram cause I wasn't giving this prick my number. He'd been messaging me demanding I teach him and asking where I was. I was getting sick of his nonsense, so I told him everything that was going on. He demanded I give him my number so I could actually talk to him. I convinced him to give me his number so I could call him, which he did. Before I called, I installed an app so my number came up as private, so he didn't have it. And for my sake of proof, it was screen recording so I had to call in case I needed it. I called him from the room I was staying in the unit temporarily, and this is how it goes.
Why are you lying to me?
I had headphones on with low volume and this still scared me. Lying about what?
You know what you're lying about.
You're going to need to clear it up. I really don't know what you're talking about.
About your mental health. You're lying and saying you have a mental illness, so you don't need to teach me French. And so you can avoid me. You're a girl, and I'm a boy, so you should respect me as your superior.
At this point, an idea popped into my head. I wasn't able to be hospitalized yet because there was no room, but that day I was staying during the day because a room was opening up. This was a Friday, and on Saturday the culture group happened in the morning where we went to the museum. I told him, if you want to see me face to face, come meet me at the museum tomorrow at 10ish because I'll be there.
You will regret saying that.
I hung up. I wouldn't. I will be wandering around with my new buddy Jamie, who I'd instantly got along with the moment I arrived. We'd be inseparable, and we acted like we'd known each other for ages. We were in groups of 2 with a nurse, and we were only 4 patients since one left Saturday morning. And the nurse would be with each group to keep an eye on us. Not that we would do anything, but they had to be sure. Also, the nurses were super friendly and acted like they wanted to be there and help you, unlike the other mental health unit across the city. And we stayed on the top 2 floors of an apartment, so it had a homely feel. And not like you were locked in a hospital, it was pretty much like shared living. So I handed my phone over. Patients have a no phone rule for the first 48 hours, and I moved upstairs. Saturday came around and after breakfast, we headed to the museum. I was with Jamie and the nurse, who was my favorite out of all the nurses who rotated shifts. She was with us. And of course, the entitled student and his entitled mother were at the museum. They found me fairly quick, a little time after Jamie, the nurse, and I started exploring and talking opinions on the exhibits.
Mommy, that little jerk that was rude to me is over there.
He points to me, and the entitled mother comes over to me.
You little jerk, lying about mental health to my precious child to make him fail his test, and you are taking up space in the hospital for those who need it.
The entitled student had obviously told her or showed her what I had said on Instagram about my situation. Now, before you call me a wuss for starting to cry, I remind you I was depressed and anxious as heck, along with a few other mental issues, so I got upset easily. And I had only agreed to this because I was sick of the harassment. The yelling and me starting to cry got the nurse's attention. She comes over while Jamie pulls me into a hug as we listen to what happened. The nurse says, "Excuse me, madam, why are you yelling at her? Can't you see you're making her unhappy?" The nurse had asked in English since she spoke it quite well.
This little lion jerk refused to teach my son French and is taking up room at your psycho unit because she's lying about mental health.
First off, just because these adolescents suffer mental health problems doesn't mean they are psychos. Secondly, do not insult her. And thirdly, what makes you think she's lying about mental health? I've got access to her case notes from the past 2 months that can prove otherwise. The entitled mother wasn't having any of this. She storms over to me and forces me away from Jamie, grabbing me harshly by the arms, which was really painful because of recent self-harm despite the thickness of the hoodie I was wearing. This jerk knew it hurt and pulled up my sleeves and looked at my arms with a look of disgust. The nurse and a few other people around were getting security, which was coming as the entitled mother was actively running her nails over my scabs and making me bleed again. Security yanked her off of me and asked her why she did that. She was yelling at them. A nice security lady brought me, the nurse, and Jamie to where the emergency medkit was kept and bandaged me up. Because of all of this, she was taken into jail for questioning. I was allowed my phone on an exception when we got back because a policeman came with us so I could make them listen to the call and showed them the messages the entitled student had sent me. After all of this, the entitled student was suspended from the school because of the harassment, and the entitled mother was sentenced to 6 months of community service, and I managed to get a restraining order against her and her son. Let me preface this by saying this happened a very long time ago. I don't recall everything exactly as it was said and done, so I will do my best to narrate the important and relevant information. Okay, first off, I'm a model railroader. Specifically, I model in O scale. For reference, that means that the average locomotive is about 3 to 4 inches tall and up to a foot long, depending on the type that is. One summer, I was taking part in a model railroad fair at our local mall, where I was displaying some of my models, being that I'm from the US. The fact that I modeled the British Isles, GWR for you British readers, meant that my display really stood out. Now, as there is always kids at these type of shows, I had taken to put in a plexiglass side around my layout to prevent kids from reaching in and touching things, or damaging various parts of the structures and models that went with the railroads. While I was watching one locomotive I had just received leave the stage area, it's a small 3-track system that lets me funnel trains into the layout and then out as I needed. I remembered this one lady making comments about the cute little trains. Getting that train running at a nice but slow pace, I approached her and smiled, asking if there is any questions she had. The lady never missed a beat, pointing to the train I had just started, and told me that her son liked trains, and I should sell her one for him. Now, truth be known, this wasn't an uncommon thing to have happened. People, usually other modelers, may ask if some units are up for sale. Sometimes they are, but typically not. I explained to her that the locomotive wasn't for sale, and that even if it was, she wouldn't have liked the price anyway, noting that the engine she was pointing to had cost me close to $1,000. The lady was having none of it, and offered me $10 for it, since it was obviously a toy. I ignored her and went back to getting the next train set up on the staging track, waiting for that one to return. As I do this, I hear an odd sound, and look up just in time to see the lady picking the locomotive up off the track and moving to hand it to her kid. I called out for her to stop, which may have been a mistake, as she promptly dropped it on the ground. The engine, though somewhat robust and heavy, was made of rather soft brass, When it hit the ground, there was a sickening crunch. I knew from the sound that the engine was done for, broken beyond repair. The lady just looked down at it, shrugged and kicked it back under the table before starting to walk off. Thankfully, security quickly caught up with her and detained her, while police were called. All the while, she kept saying that,
"It's just a toy. Men don't play with toys,"
while ignoring the fact that she was surrounded by dozens of train layouts, with just as many grown men showing off their work. Police arrested her on destruction of private property charges, while the mall itself barred her from ever setting foot on their property again. Later, with her information on hand from the police report, I filed a case against her for the replacement of the locomotive. And you won't believe it, but she had the gall to try to convince the judge that it was just a toy, and the receipts I had for purchases of the locomotive weren't real, saying that she had seen the exact same locomotive at Walmart herself. Well, the case ended up in my favor, with her having to pay me replacement costs, as well as some punitive damages. The judge ended the case with a simple warning that just because you want something doesn't give you the right to simply take it. From the criminal side of things, I think the lady ended up with 40 or so hours of community service and a substantial fine as well. Here is hoping she learned her lesson. For context, back in Australia in 2003, there was a bushfire in our capital city that destroyed a large amount of major suburbs in and around the city. After this bushfire, some family friends were in government housing, and sadly, their house burned to the ground. They barely had time to flee the house with lives and lost all their personal belongings and photos in the house as they got out. As expected, they needed to put in an insurance claim to get the finances to restore a new life and have the house be rebuilt. Now, the government, being the amazing and wonderful people they are, in Australia are about as good as a government in another red tape first-based country. They had a strict policy that to move out of a government housing place and be placed in a new one, even at the same physical address, you need to hand back the master keys of the property. My family friends argued that that's stupid as the keys burned with the house and melted into a pool of molten slush. The house foundation was destroyed and there are physically no windows or doors. The government insurance rep stood by the laws. No keys, no claim. They even got a free government aid lawyer to help, but alas, they could not get past this impasse. Eventually, me, in my pittiness and malicious compliance mentality, came to the rescue. We went to a local locksmith and bought the first blank key off the rack and handed that in. The government rep tried to fight it tooth and nail, saying it was not a valid key. Luckily, the lawyer they had hired saw the logic of my plan and argued only that the rules stated the master keys had to be returned. They tried to argue there was no way these were the official keys. The lawyer did started the insurance rep and told him outright that these keys open every lock on the property, and if they doubted, they are welcome to go and check in person to confirm. In the end, the insurance rep, acknowledging he was beaten, paid up and my friends got into a new home. Based on the results of our case, the lawyer got his other clients to do the same, and 8 months later the entire street my friends were on had been fully replaced. Thank you for watching and see you next time.